Now, to the bottom of the hour, I can't go over his whole bio, or it would take 30 minutes. Ted Malloch of TedMalloch.com joins us. I can't go over his whole pedigree of the major institutions he's run, or where he's a professor, or all the things that he's been involved in. He's also been a high-ranking official on the UN Economic Commission for Europe and president of the CNN World Economic Development Congress, Davos, the whole 9 yards. And I appreciate him coming on. I mean, here are the headlines out of the Washington Post, Breitbart, New York Post. Why Europe fears this great U.S. ambassador is the headline. So they're battling. Here's another headline. European Parliament battles nomination of Ted Malloch as U.S. ambassador. So they're saying don't nominate him, Trump, even though that's who they've said they want to nominate, because if you do that, we're going to veto it, which, again, is unprecedented. And, of course, I've seen Ted Malloch all over TV for years. I mean, he comes off as very diplomatic. I mean, sounds like a perfect choice. If you went over his whole bio here, he's already been accepted into all these groups. They know who he is. It says suave and distinguished. He's a professor at the respected British Business School, former Oxford visiting fellow, Yale professor. He's written 14 books as high-ranking official at the UN Economic Commission. And it just goes on and on. I can't read the whole bio. So why does Trump want him? Why are they trying to block it? I think talking to the man himself, we can find out. His longtime friend, Dr. Jerome Corsi, who's also joining us via Skype, can pop in. Ted, thanks for coming on. What's going on here?
Alex, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be on your show. I last saw you at the inauguration when we were celebrating President Trump's arrival on the Washington scene. And last night, of course, as you've just shown in your clip, he said he's going to be president of the United States and not president of the world. The reason that I think, raised such a controversy in Europe is certainly not because of my educational pedigree or my dialogical skills. It's because I represent the worldview and the thinking of Donald Trump in Europe, and they actually hate and detest everything he is, stands for, and has said, because he's turning the whole world over. And he's changing their globalist outlook and forcing the world back into a state-centric system.
Now, I know that that's something you've talked about and promoted quite a lot. I mean, let's get into your particular view of where the world currently is and where this battle to get you into that position is going.
Well, I have not yet been nominated by the president. I have interviewed with the transition team, and I was told I was favorably disposed to be put forward in such a position. Certainly it's leaked. I've been on television talking about the EU and about Trump. I was involved in the campaign. I wrote a book about Trump's path to victory. So I've been all over both the British press and the European press. And that's frankly because very few people in Europe expected Trump to win, had any knowledge of what he was thinking, what kinds of policies he might enact. They frankly didn't have anybody else to turn to, so there are only a handful of us, frankly, in Europe that have any sensibility about what Trump represents. So I have had, I would say, even overexposure in the last 8 weeks.
Absolutely. I've seen you all over TV, and I don't even watch that much mainstream television. Well, looking at this, when you look at the New York Post, it's obviously pretty close to Trump. They act like you are the nominee. I understand you're not officially, but the way the EU sees it is they're like, hey, you're nominating him. You better not do it. We'll veto that. Can you explain how they have the, quote, power to do that? I mean, if you become who Trump wants to represent us and then that happens, then why wouldn't that be something that that they would accept?
Well, what the European Union and frankly other countries around the world want is not so much a U.S. ambassador to them who represents the U.S. point of view, or in this case, the view of the Trump administration. What they really want is someone who will represent their view back to the United States. In other words, one that becomes captive or nativist and that takes their point of view. What they fear is that the Trump position and his view, which has been fairly clear in terms of Brexit and in terms of multilateralism and certainly supranational organizations, is not something that would be welcome in Brussels, where the European Union is headquartered, because they fear that the union itself is coming apart. with the vote of the United Kingdom to leave that European Union, and with a number of elections coming up in any number of other European countries, and potentially a referenda on whether the country should either stay in the Eurozone and keep the euro as their currency or even leave the European Union, they fear that their union is frankly in a position of, if not collapse, of derailment.
That's right. Even the French news agency yesterday called it a soft civil war. You've got Poland trying to pull out. Le Pen basically says she'll pull out of the EU or discipline it and actually make it serve national interest. You've got Geert Wilders in the lead in the Netherlands. You've got Italy, as you know, a month or so ago, saying we're not going to vote to have EU expansion. We're not going to accept an EU army marching in. The arrogance of the EU, this unelected body, saying, oh, you want to pull out countries? We're just going to dissolve your militaries and put them under our control. I mean, the arrogant, open conquest of this, and I know you're a leading expert on this, how would you break down, I mean, because you are a historian on these subjects, the place we are in the world where suddenly nationalism and self-determination is the avant-garde, it's exploding like wildfire, and it's having success, and now with Trump, mega success, you see obviously with what happened with Brexit, and then the system just becomes more arrogant and tells us we should live austerely while they live like kings. I mean, it's like Marie Antoinette. I know she didn't really say this, but, you know, let them eat cake, and then that became Bastille Day. It just seems almost like, you know, those that the gods would destroy, they would first make mad. So since you've been all over Europe, you know all these people, you're in the middle of it. What's really going on?
Well, I summed it up in an op-ed the other day when I said Davos man is dead. Now, whether he's literally dead or just dying, I think is a question of medical terminology. But this view that the global elites can run our countries, can run our lives, can run our cultures, most of them unelected, undemocratic, socialist in orientation, progressive in terms of ideology, some of them far to the left, not just socialists, but even further to the left, is frankly coming to a screeching halt. And that's happening in large part because the pendulum is now swinging in the opposite direction. The election of Donald Trump has signaled that with a megaphone. Of course, Brexit before it, Nigel Farage and the whole movement to leave Europe was not supposed to be victorious. And it has actually now, I think, changed the course of modern European, maybe even global history, because that pendulum, like the pencil that's falling off the table, has reached its tipping point, and a number of countries around the world are likely to follow suit.
You know, maybe we can pull that clip up briefly of when Brexit passed, and the next day, Nigel Farage, leading the torch in Europe, obviously, and I know you know him as well, says, you know, you laughed at me 15 years ago when I was first in this body. You're not laughing now, but they still laugh. And then Pelosi won't even stand up, you know, for the veterans. The Democrats sat down. They boo and get upset when Trump talks about America first. I mean, the disconnect of these people. In the same press conference, Pelosi thinks Bush is still president 8+ years later. And then Maxine Waters gets up and says, well, Trump's helping Putin, who invaded Korea. They don't even say North or South Korea in their mistake. It's just la-la land. And I've been around these people. I've talked to some of them. They really are so insulated that I guess I was wrong back when I thought it was more centralized and conspiratorial. It's more like just a bunch of corrupt people got in control. Special interests just come in. And it's almost worse than a conspiracy, because it's like we just have no defense mechanism against these inept, horrible people that have sold us out for pennies on the dollar.
Well, you're talking about the Democratic Party in the United States, and it was quite observable last night when half the room was giving the president a deserved standing ovation for some, I think, very, very sincere words, both about the American military and about our military heroes, and also about some of the policies he wants to enact. And the other half of the room either sat on their hands or hissed him. So it's a very polarized situation. That situation is actually 10 times worse in Europe, where the political spectrum is certainly left of the United States, and where Donald Trump is held in the highest degree of contempt. I think it would interest you, Alex. I was on CNN before the election, and Becky Anderson's show. I do go on all these shows. I keep getting invited and go back, maybe to torture them as much as myself. But she asked me seriously. The question that she asked me was, "Don't you think the whole world should get to vote for the United States president?"
Wow. I missed that. Well, let's find that clip. What was the name of the clip? Do you remember on YouTube?
Well, it's Becky Anderson's show, State of the World, or whatever it's called.
Yeah, guys, Google it. State of the World. Everybody, everyone in the world should be able to vote for president. I want to find that. That is incredible. Glenn Beck. I don't want to sit here and bash Glenn Beck, sir, but Glenn Beck was on CNN last week, and he said, quote, "It's scary that Trump and Bannon want nationalism and economic nationalism." I mean, that is, so again, there it is. I mean, what are they doing?
Well, I mean, Glenn Beck, I think, has been off his rocker for some time, but Steve Bannon is the genius behind this intellectually. He is the strategist. He talked about his 3 buckets that he's trying to work out of during CPAC the other day, and I think that was very telltale, very constructive. And certainly Donald Trump has taken that course, and he argues very forcefully, frankly, as Theodore Roosevelt did and other people did at the turn of the 20th century, for America's national economic health. We need to rebuild our country.
We're talking about renewal.
We are talking about renewal of the American spirit. And I actually, I am a spiritual person, a Christian. And I noticed that Trump mentioned God at least a half a dozen times, it seemed, last
night in his
speech. So the origin even of some of this impetus is clear in his thinking. And I tell you, people on the right, people in evangelical circles, strong Catholics appreciate what the president is saying.
Well, we definitely need to get you in there as the ambassador to the European Union. I'd say that's probably the second most important, if not the most important, after the ambassador to the UN, obviously. And again, they've got you here in the newspapers as if you were already the nominee. So that's how they're seeing it. This is the New York Post. It says why Europe fears this great U.S. ambassador. The website's tedmalloch.com. What else can we do, as I bring Dr. Corsi in here briefly, what else can we do to help ensure, I know you've also written a lot of books as well, to make sure that this new nationalism, what I call 1776 worldwide, the American example worldwide, not physical force, but the American spirit of Renaissance reborn for renewal of the whole planet. This is what we need, not a UN global corporate elite dictatorship coming in, dictating the terms of human surrender to the technocracy. What can we do to have Trump fully nominate you and then try to somehow finesse you into the position and have the EU accept it?
Well, there are 2 things. Obviously, in the first hand, we have to remind Donald Trump that I've had this conversation and that I'm the best candidate, I think, to represent that point of view in Europe because of qualifications. And frankly, because, I've spent all this time in Europe and understand and can constructively talk with them. I'm not there, to be their arch enemy. I just have to bring them our point of view. And secondly, I think if the European Union wants to make me persona non grata, which is what they say, it would be a badge of honor to make me PNG in Brussels and actually say we won't accept an ambassador from the United States who has Trump's point of view. I think we should then do 2 things. Send them no ambassador and deal with them only on a bilateral basis.
Yes.
And secondly, remove their ambassador from Washington, D.C.
Because if they're not going to accept our ambassador, that's usually what you do right before a war happens.
Correct.
I mean, it's just unprecedented, the arrogance. Well, you look at arrogance in history. Hitler, as you know, just a week before he finally got, killed or committed suicide, there under the chancellery in Berlin, still thought he was going to beat the Russians and the Allies, was totally delusional, and his people still believed him. Now, I think we're far from that, but we're getting close where nationalism's exploding. It's so popular, and this globalism is unelected, so disconnected, so corrupt. I mean, they're never going to be able to have this private corporate world government with a whole socialist bent to it when there's opposition to it. They're losing ground everywhere. They back the very worst actors like, radical Islam. They're just horrible people. who are so disconnected that they don't get it. So, I mean, I think we need to explain to them, you're going to lose. You need to get with the program and believe in humanity again, instead of having this eugenics view of, you know, cut off the resources, enslave the people, while they themselves live like kings. Let's bring in Dr. Jerome Corsi, who I know is a big, you know, a booster of, you know, Trump trying to ram you through, which I think is a good move, you know, play the Trump card on him. I think this is a great idea, Dr. Corsi. Again, the New York Post and folks, I mean, act like he's already the ambassador. How do we get this through?
Well, I've known Ted for a long time, and he's the best choice. I was with Ted and Nigel Farage during the inauguration. Ted has the very strong support of all the Brexit leaders. He will represent accurately and strongly President Trump's position to the EU. This is what frightens the EU, and it is really astounding. I mean, by the way, Ted is a President Roosevelt descendant. He is a PhD. He's very strongly regarded both in academics. He's been on the international stage, but he's not a globalist. This is the remarkable thing about Ted Malloch. He's been at Davos. He's actually run the Aspen Institute. He's run them both, but he's done it always with a perspective of the United States.
And that's why they don't like him, just like Bannon from Goldman Sachs. He's been inside the systems. He knows how to work it. He's been at the highest levels, but he's going to represent us. That's why they're scared.
That's right. He didn't drink their Kool-Aid. He went along with the internationalism, but from a perspective,
just like Rex Tillerson did, to be able to stay where he was at, but quietly fighting it the whole time.
Precisely. And this is really what the core of Donald Trump's strength is, and the key reason he was elected. The American people do not want to become part of some godless global system, unelected officials in Brussels telling us what to do. We want the United States of America. We want the Constitution. We want, you know, the freedoms that our founding fathers gave us, in a Judeo-Christian nation that was born with principles that have been astounding in terms of their ability to protect liberty.
Sure, and people that are watching on TV all recognize Ted Malloch, but I should have said Aspen Institute, one of the most elite international organizations. People say, well, then why do you want him? Because over the years, he's always fought to keep sovereignty and to promote free market systems, and now he'll be able to help dynamite these tentacles of control that are bringing us down and turn the whole world free. That's why we need him, and I sure hope that Trump does this.
Well, it's you know, that you're exactly right. I mean, see, Alex, he ran Davos for over 10 years.
I forgot that, ran Davos, and he's saying Davos is dead. I mean, I should have introed this. I never hype things like I should. The man that ran Davos and the Aspen Institute is saying that the New World Order that they've set up is dead, and that we need to have nations create a new global alliance to empower humanity. That is absolutely incredible. No wonder they don't want him in there.
Well, I helped Ted get his memoirs published 2 years ago, because it's a remarkable story of, you know, someone who's been on the globalist stage at the highest level, running Davos, running the Aspen Institute in the United Nations in Geneva. I mean, Ted has pedigree credentials of the New World Order, but Ted has constantly said that we need to preserve American sovereignty. He was a supporter of Donald Trump.
And notice, all you need to know is the globalists are against Trump, the globalists are against Ted Malloch, because they understand that. They fear the understanding he has. So I should have introed this. Let me do it again now. Ladies and gentlemen, we've got Ted Malloch, the man that ran Davos, the public Bilderberg group, for 10 years, that ran the Aspen Institute, the guy that knows where all the bodies are buried, that has the keys to the kingdom, who's quietly been trying to stop the system forever. Donald Trump wants to send him to be the EU ambassador, and they're trying to blow that up right now. This is incredible. Well, Ted, in closing, how do we make sure, again, the listeners, that you're the man that Trump forces through?
Well, there's a little bit of exaggeration or hyperbole in my good friend Jerry's recitation of my biography. I never really ran Davos. I was only on the executive board for, I think, 4 or 5 years. But
so you were only on the executive board of Davos. You're a nobody.
I have at least some degree of humility, like Vice President Pence, which
we need humility. You're right.
Is strongest.
But I'm just excited if you get in there to be able to help bring down the EU. I'm sorry.
Yeah, if people in the United States could support my being involved whether it's in this role or another role, I think that I could help the Trump effort, particularly on the international front.
Absolutely. Well, Mr. Malloch, thank you so much. People can find out more about your books at tedmalloch.com. MSM is going to attack him being on the show. That's good. We don't want to be with the system. We are the folks trying to remove the globalist elite, and we need somebody like Mr. Malloch who knows how to burn this thing down and restore the republic. All right, we'll be back, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Alex Jones. This is The InfoWar. Thank you, Dr. Corsi, as well.